Welcome all. I'm sure you all thoroughly enjoyed our previous session. Our next session is a fireside chat with the leadership team of Talenomics India. Let us take this opportunity to welcome the leaders, Pramat Raj Sinha, Ipsita Katuria, and Binu Wadhwa. Welcome all. Pramat is a pioneering force for higher education in India. He is the founder and chairman of Harappa Education, which strives to become India's largest online institution for skill development. He is the founding dean and a member of executive board of ISB, which rapidly became one of the top 20 business schools in the world. He is also a founder and trustee of the acclaimed Ashoka University. He has been a media entrepreneur, education consultant, management advisor at the 9.9 Group, the CEO of Anand Bazar Patrika Group, and a partner at McKinsey. Welcome, Pramad. Good to have you here. Ipsita is the founder and CEO of Talentnomics India and principal of Talentnomics Incorporation. She has over 30 years of experience in human resource management and has held leadership positions in public and private sectors in India. She has worked with International Monetary Fund for a decade in various capacities. Ipshita is truly passionate of empowering women at various levels, especially for leadership roles. Welcome, Ipsita.
Thank you.
And Binu. Binu is the COO of Talentnomics India. She is an HR consultant and a passionate champion of women empowerment. She has previously served as the Chief People Officer for Yum Restaurants International. During her tenure, Yum was listed in the top 50 great places to work and was awarded the Shell Helen Keller Award for enrolling specially able teams into the workforce. Welcome, Binu, and over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Aparna. And actually, thank you, Anish. I know you're not here, but I'm hoping you're listening in. You both have been amazing, I must say, amazing MCs. And thanks for agreeing to do this conference for us. We're very excited to share with everybody a new framework, which we believe is very relevant in today's time. What I'll do is I'll kind of have some questions for you, Pramath, and some questions for you, Upsita. And let me start with you, Upsita, and ask you, what have your observations have been about the conference so far? What are the kind of discussions you've heard? And how do you think it kind of revalidates the leadership framework that we, swear by and leverage at Talenomics? Over to you.
Thank you, Binu. First of all, I have to say this, that's an honor to share the platform with Pramath, who is a thought leader in leadership space. And he has contributed hugely to building leaders of tomorrow through various leadership programs. So Pramath, thank you so much for being with us on this platform. And I'm also really glad, Binu, to be in conversation with you. You have built so many leaders across sectors, and now you continue to do so with us. So big thank you to you. Well, as you know, Binu, every sector needs great leaders, and every progressive organization puts in a lot of resources to identify and develop these leaders. And over the years, different scales have been used for measuring leadership attributes. Previously, they were mainly centered around grit and toughness, what Hari called earlier in the morning as the masculine leadership style. These attributes now have changed, but probably not enough. We see the kind of leadership that's succeeding in today's world, and we have to reflect back that really what is working. So this is our opportunity to move forward and reinvent the leadership models, and not only in our organizations, but also in our own minds and our society, in how we are looking at leaders. So I'm really looking forward to discussing this whole new framework with both of you. And as Binu, as you asked, personally, I've learned a great deal in the last 2 days. One thing that came out consistently from the various speakers is that future leaders need to have a good balance of both grit and grace. We heard leaders need to have a purpose and be very focused about that. Something which will be inspiring for others. Many speakers brought that up, starting from a keynote speaker And I remember that line which Anish has repeated again and again in the conference, be the drop that will create the wave, as Princess Mabel noted in her keynote address. So we all need to have a purpose and be that change agent and follow through so that we can create a wave of change. The other thing that I heard a lot coming out from various speakers is to be collaborative, build connection, and support each other, especially women, as Rania said yesterday. They tend to shy away from building their network and from connecting with others and supporting other women. Third thing, of course, loud and clear, is to be able to take bold and innovative decisions in the face of ambiguity and complexities and crisis. Rubana emphasized on this. Henriette and Sanjay both pointed out this whole issue of being able to take bold and innovative decisions as leaders. And last couple of points I think I'd mentioned, because these are all really immense learning for me, in terms of being empathetic and inclusive towards your team, towards your client, towards your vendor and community. So don't be only focused on the efficient business results, but understand the situation and circumstances these people are operating on to be a really good, inspiring leader. And last but not the least is be open to learning, show your vulnerabilities and reinvent yourself. It's okay to say you don't know, you don't have all the answers. And that's absolutely something which is a key trait of a leader for tomorrow. And while you do that, you be your authentic self. What matters most is you are yourself as you're leading and not trying to copy other styles and be somebody else. So I'm really delighted, Vinu, that what we've learned in the last 2 days integrates, I think in my mind, very well with the 4 C's of Talentnomics. And I know you will talk a little bit about this as we go forward. But what I just wanted to say is when we started this journey to prepare women to be leaders of tomorrow, we did a lot of research, a focus group discussion, case studies, etc., and identified these 4 C's as critical elements for any leader, but much more so for women. They tend to especially struggle with confidence, connection, and credibility in terms of having their own brand and their own voice. So Binu, over to you. You've been leading this program for us for the last 4 years. So could you share what you think this has brought to the table?
Thank you, Ipsita. And I'll come to you soon, Pramath. Just adding on to what Ipsita just said, that we've realized that as we went about designing our programs and actually leveraging them and implementing them, one thing came out very clearly is that these 4 C's, what we call capability, confidence, connection, and credibility, are very key elements for any good leader. And that got revalidated for us, as Ipsita was saying, that of all the, cohorts and women leaders who've gone through our programs, the kind of impact the focus on these 4 has done on them, the change that they themselves and the organizations have seen on them by just focusing on the 4 in their leadership journey is amazing. So we really do feel these 4 C's are very, very critical elements to any leader, good leadership. So let's talk about the 4. And as I said, I'll invite Pramath. So let me talk about the first C. We call it confidence. And here, what we're trying to talk about confidence is all about taking bold decisions. It's about resilience. It's about being authentic, communicating authentically. It's about quick rebounding from failures. So Pramath, here is a question for you. You have actually taken a lot of bold decisions, starting from starting an ISB and now the Harappa online education. And all is against traditional wisdom, or people hadn't heard of these things before. What gives you the conviction to make such decisions?
Well, the first conviction is, Binu, that some of the things that I do, or most of the things that I am privileged to do in education, is all for the benefit of others. And I'm not trying to say this in some sort of charitable and noble way. I think we all do things that are charitable and noble. It could be Doesn't have to be done for education or charity. It could be for your family. It could be for your
True.
parents. But I think when you're doing some things that help others, then I think your ability to take risk and bold decisions goes up, because it's not selfish in that way. And you feel that, hey, why not try it out? If it doesn't work, you at least tried, you'll go on and do something else. So I think that's the first thing, the purpose behind what you're doing. I think the second is that, well, you mentioned all the things that I've been successful at, but you don't know all the things I have failed at. And I think that is very much part of all our journeys. And people don't talk about the successes, or people do talk about failures, but people ignore them, or the resumes don't have it. But I think if you look at my failure resume, then it will tell you that having failed makes you even more bold, because having tasted failure and survived, you feel, well, if I could survive that, I can survive the next one. And so the fear of failure, at least decreases with time if you have failed enough, is how I put it. So I think that's the other reason you take some bolder decisions, because you are less, I don't think you ever get rid of the fear, but you are less fearful with time. And third, and most importantly, I think you are able to take these bold decisions because you have been able to face the setbacks and overcome them, right? So that gives you a different kind of confidence that, yes, something happened. At that time, it seemed like there was absolutely no future at all. And now, and I came out of it. And in fact, most of these setbacks actually make you do even better, is how I have found. Because then you are truly tested and you think more innovatively and creatively. So I think it's a combination of the fact that you are focused on something that is very high purpose, as well as the fact that over time you develop a track record of recovering from these types of setbacks and failures, that then allows you to not see decisions as risky or bold as much as exciting with the possibility of failing. But who knows, if it doesn't work, you'll find something else or you move on.
So Pramit, any tip for people to say that when you fail, how do you bounce back? What goes on in your head? How do you bounce back?
Well, there are 2 or 3 things that I would again say there. The first is that you have to become a bit of a stoic and not immediately react. This is a course that we have on Harappa called Embracing Change, where we actually talk about this. And one of the things we found as we were putting that course together is that the first thing is that the reaction to something like that can be very strong. And this is you end up having a very emotional reaction. And so trying to put some distance or some space between what happened and what you should do about it, or how you should view it, and therefore react to it in a more deliberate manner, is the first thing. It's not easy. It's easy for me to say it, but it's difficult for all of us to do. And again, it's not one of those things you completely get rid of. You never become that evolved or enlightened that you can just completely ignore what is happening. But at least the awareness that something terrible has happened,
Yeah.
and instead of reacting, you need to think deliberately about it. Once you start to think deliberately about it, the thing to first and foremost tell yourself is that this is not something that is permanent.
True.
Not take it personally, and not think that it is all pervasive. What happens is when something like this happens, we say, oh my God, my whole life is over. Or I made the mistake and oh my God, I'm such a stupid person. Or if it's affecting my work, it is going to affect my relationship. My boyfriend will not like me, right? So I think those tendencies you have to become aware of and say that this is not all pervasive. This is not permanent. This is not personal. These things happen. And so this is still part of sort of reasoning your way through this. Then I think you have to reframe what happened, right? And by reframe, I mean that, even in the worst of situations, And this is not trying to just be motivational for the sake of it. Even in the worst of situations, find the things that could actually have a silver lining or create an opportunity. I can tell you, all of us are facing this in the pandemic, right? I mean, you could have given up and said, we won't do this conference, right? And you could have said, listen, we'll just wait for the vaccine to come and things to be over. Ek saal, if we don't do the conference, so what happens?
True.
But you said, no, this is an opportunity. It's an opportunity for us to go online. It's an opportunity for us to reach many more people, right? And get some speakers who we would otherwise have not been able to get. You would not have had Shiv Khera travel to Delhi to speak to your audience, but you were able to do that thanks to this, right? So I think you changed a disruptive thing into a positive thing. And I think that is very important. And finally, the thing is to act on it, right? I mean, I think you can always come up with many ideas, but the making sure that you follow through and will yourself and force yourself to act is another aspect of it. So I think the awareness, acceptance, the reframing, and the acting is what I would say goes into recovering from these failures and setbacks.
Those are such, they sound so simple, but amazing, Pramad. I think one can really relate with that, is being aware to reframe and then look for the silver lining and then act. I think is a good way to put it. Let's talk about the second bit of the C, which is about capability. And I think it's all about, leveraging expert knowledge, because I don't think knowledge is limited in today's world, it's not limited to what you know, but leveraging expert knowledge. It's collaborating and creating win-win solutions. I think reinventing yourself is the only way to stay relevant today, and more so in today's times. And the best part is that there is the opportunity to reinvent yourself just now. So Pramad, just thinking that if you look at this pre-COVID to post-COVID, what do you think are some of the leadership styles that you think needs reinventing? Some leadership style that need to be dropped, or maybe nothing needs to be dropped, but you need to add a few skills or styles that's going to actually help you in good stead in this environment just now. What do you think that would be?
So I do think that this ability to look beyond and start working on that is a capability that I think is very important. And it requires this capability. I think we all have this, but the effort to learn something new, because there is a sense that the world of tomorrow is going to be different and some of these new skills will help you. I mean, look at the skill of operating online.
Right.
I think a lot of us are not going to completely give this up, right? Even if the world goes back to normal.
Sure.
So, but it's new. I'm teaching a lot of classes online, and I have to tell you that I never taught so much in class as I'm doing online. It's a challenge. The good thing is that I'm able to connect to far many more students than I would otherwise have been able to do. But it's a challenge to engage people online. After this lecture today, after this speech today, I have a 2-hour lecture. Now, engaging somebody for 2 hours really takes the energy out of you, right? Because you're talking and you're watching somebody on screen and you have to manage them and so on. So how do you get people to turn on their videos when you are teaching, right?
Sure.
And so on and so forth. So I feel that you have to really learn new things at a time like this. And that takes a lot of effort from people like you and I. Well, not you, but me, who's kind of past that age when you are kind of easy to learn. I think the other skill that really gets enhanced at a time like this is the skill of empathy. I think this one has really been a situation where you have to, and I think Ipsita mentioned it earlier, but I think leaders have to be very, very empathetic at times like this.
Sure.
Some of us are very lucky that you are living in a bubble and nothing is happening, but equally, so many employees in my company, for example, have had COVID. Their families have had COVID. People have lost relatives. Yet we seem to be working hard as ever. how do you balance the pressure of performance and execution, and exactly what Ipsita was referring to, and have a much heightened level of empathy? There's a lot of issues with mental health. There's a lot of issues with vendors and clients who are facing challenges. And you have to be empathetic towards them also, which normally you are not, right? Because, with vendors, you are pretty demanding. With clients, you are like, fine, if you don't want to hire me, I'll go somewhere else. So I do think that some of those skills become very important at times like this, and which prepare you for the future that is to come.
I think so well put. Looking forward again, be empathetic. I think very, very important balancing act. Thanks, Pramath. Ipsita, question for you. We've known each other for many years from the corporate world, and now you're a founder of an NGO. How did you make this shift? How did you reinvent yourself?
Yeah, Binu. I don't want to say the number of years we've known each other. It'll give away our age.
and Pramath thinks we are young. That was very
That's right. So I want to keep his illusion about this. So Binu, just to answer your question, every time we change roles, we have to reinvent ourselves. Every time I have changed roles, I'm sure Pramath has done it, moving from McKinsey to Ashoka or to ISB. He's had to learn new skills every time. And same with me, when I moved from a large PSU, public sector, to a smaller IT company as head of HR, I was completely unprepared for some of the things that came my way. Having to make decisions on the fly, innovating with every problem that came, and even understanding aspirations of young, educated staff. It was new to me. So again, when I moved from India to IMF, entirely a different ballgame. Understanding cultural nuances of colleagues from 180 plus countries was a great learning for me. So I had to adapt myself without losing my authenticity. So while previous learning helps, you have to always be open to learning new skills and adapt to new culture, new situation. Yes, I have failed like many times, I'm sure, like as Pramath is saying, we don't beat our failures as much as we beat our successes. But the ability to quickly pick up yourself and move on, as Pramath was just saying, is very, very important. The longer we stay in a failure, it just tends to sap our energy, and we sort of enlarge the failure for more than what it is. So to tell yourself, it's okay, it's fine, I have failed, it's difficult, but as Pramath very rightly said, doesn't define me. So you pick up and you move on. I think the other thing which I really felt has held me at good stead was that my interest and ability to invest in people, make friends, and stay connected with colleagues across the world has been very, very useful for me, and very, very rewarding for me, more than useful. It has made it possible for me to call upon them for support, for advice, for guidance whenever I needed it. And I have never been failed on that. And even for this conference, look at the number of people who came from the different countries and all. It's because at some point we have connected and stayed connected. So.
Was it difficult, Ipsita? How easy or difficult was it for you to change to your current role?
I would say that, yes, it was not easy. The main issue was I had always worked in corporate sector. For 30, 35 years, I worked in corporate sector. It had given me great learning, but this was a completely new world to be, in a way, entrepreneur, a social entrepreneur, start my own company. It was a completely new world for me. So what did I do really to be able to survive for the 5 years, and not only survive, really enjoy every minute of the 5 years I've spent as after founding Talentnomics. So when I started off, I had, of course, no idea how to start your own company, starting from the legalities of how to incorporate one, and no idea, no ABC of raising funds, or I even hated asking for money. So what did I do? I think most important thing that that helped me, as I had a very clear purpose of what I was trying to achieve. and believe that I could do it if I tried hard enough. And that was to bring about gender parity in leadership. I wanted very, very badly to leave a better world for our daughters and our granddaughters. So that was my purpose, so that the girls have equal opportunity. So that gave me a lot of, I think, power to move forward in this direction. The second thing I did is I read up a lot on the topic, on the issue. I, informed myself on what it is. If I'm going to do something in this new area, I need to know as much about it as anybody else. And the most important thing here is I surrounded myself with experts in the field and surrounded myself with women and men leaders who believed in potential of women to be leaders of tomorrow, like Pramath here and Saurabh and Anita. They're all great mentors and great proponents of gender parity. And I have learned a lot from them. So, I decided that having them around is going to give me the strength to move forward. And the most difficult part for me was to learn about asking for funding. Very, very uncomfortable at first. I remember my first conversation with Pramath. I had gone there to request.
I was there, Ipsita, I was there with you, if you remember.
You were there with me, Binu. Yeah. I don't know whether you remember this conversation, Pramath, but I had gone to request you to be on our board. And you asked me two questions. First thing you said, I have so many commitments already. Why should I take up one more that I may not have time for? So Pramath, I don't really remember what I said to convince you, but you've been on our board for last 3 years, so something must have worked there.
Yeah. So I think let's go to the next one. I think it's a nice segue to say it's all about credibility, right?
Credibility.
Absolutely. I think it's all about credibility. It's something which rarely builds over time. It's not something which happens with a little switch. And I do think it was good to hear from you, Pramath, and good to hear from Ipsita. It's all about...
Just one more thing I would like to say here about Pramath's advice to me, which I think really stayed with me very much. And Pramath, I don't know whether you remember this one. I was telling you about how uncomfortable I'm about asking for money and raising money and all that. And you asked me that whether I believed in my mission and its worth. And I said, of course, I left my job with the IMF to do this. So I was wondering why he's asking me this question. But your point was that since I was asking for money for a worthwhile cause that will make this world a better place and not for myself, why should I hesitate? That was a huge learning for me, Pramath. And every time I'm slightly uncomfortable with reaching out to people for money, I remind myself of this point. So thank you so much, Pramath, for this.
Pramath, I never forget to remind her about that. So it's always helps. Yeah, so I think let's talk about credibility. I think we've all spoken about it. I think the third C, critical leadership trait, is how do you build credibility over time? And that really is through a clear purpose, building your own brand, being your authentic self. So question for you, Pramath. You are an internationally acknowledged leader in the field of education. What's the surest way to build credibility in your mind? Gives our women some tip.
Well, firstly, thank you for inviting me to the board, and it's always been my privilege, given what you all do. I think credibility for me, and particularly for my role in education, has been only and all about delivering. I think there are far too many people who are all talk and no action, and not just action. All action and no result is also not credible. So for me, and unfortunately, this is the reality of the business world. It may seem harsh for me to say that, but there are no brownie points for just working hard any longer. Maybe there used to be in some day and age. Today, if you don't deliver, you are not credible. You can write whatever you want in your resume. You can claim to have studied in the best institutions. You can claim to have had the best degrees. You can claim to have worked in the most famous companies. You can claim whatever else you can claim. But if you are not able to show results, if you are not able to move the needle and be very clearly seen as somebody who has delivered, then people don't see you credibly. In fact, it is worse if you talk too much and don't deliver, because then people think you are a gas bag and that you are all talk and no action. So that's my simple definition of credibility. Of course, there are many other ways in which you can be credible. I think you have to do what you say. You have to mean what you say. You have to be very, very clear that in your communication, you are not, waving your hands, as they say in America. You are based on you say things that you really believe and mean. And if there are things that you can't back up, if there are things you can't deliver on, if there are things that are not are being said out of sort of just some hollow conviction, then I don't think you'll be credible. So I think for me, the ability to deliver and then to really always truly mean what you say really means a lot in terms of helping with credibility.
Pramod, a little question for you. Advice for women leaders. They normally feel, in a male-dominated environment, they sometimes feel, and we heard about it in the morning also, they need to be more masculine. They can't be their authentic self. What could be your advice that women could just be what they are and still be very successful and great leaders?
So listen, I don't know if I'm being realistic in saying this, but if you are working in an organization or if you are working for a boss that is not allowing you to be your authentic self, then that organization doesn't deserve you. And that's the simple thing. I don't think you have to be compromising. I don't think you have to be like a man. I don't think you have to be like another woman.
Thank you.
You have to just be yourself. And by the way, we men face it all the time too. Okay. And we've learned it the hard way. Maybe we have it in our genes or in our DNA or in our training to fight this, but you have it too, by the way. You should just fight it. I will tell you that I was hired by McKinsey as a diversified hire. Why was I treated as a diversified hire? Because I was a non-MBA. I did not have an MBA. I was 29 years old. I had a PhD. I had publications, but I was treated like, this exotic new person who was diversifying as women and African Americans and Hispanics and so on, right? So I have experienced what I think, I don't mean to compare, and I shouldn't, because of course the discrimination women face is much more deep-seated but my point is that I succeeded because I was authentic. Fair enough, McKinsey had hired me, but you know what? I was an experiment. I was paid less than the MBAs. I was treated differently than the MBAs. My path to partnership was different, and I had to prove myself. So I think that the best way that I could prove myself was through my work. I stuck to delivering work as I could. I, in fact, delivered work which was different from the way MBAs were delivering. And that's what made me stand out. And that was my authenticity. So I do think that, and I tried to conform as well. For a while, I tried to conform. I tried to dress like them. I tried to speak like them. I tried to sound intelligent like them. I tried to use all the jargon. And then I realized that I was trying to fit myself into a mold. And why? And it turned out that when I truly became myself, that's when I became more successful, because people started saying, oh, Pramod is different. He thinks differently. He behaves differently. Let's take him to some clients because those clients will like him, not, So I think if you carve out your own space, success will happen naturally. It takes some doing. It takes some doing for all of us. And if the organization doesn't respect you for that, if your people and your bosses don't respect you for that, then that's not the place.
I think you said it so well. If you carve out your own place, and that's what's important. And the rest, you've been very successful, so I'm sure there's no regrets there. And you're a living example, actually. So I'll go to the last bit, and which is, I think, something we've alluded to a little earlier, which is connection, which is building social capital, being inclusive, breaking boundaries. Question for you again, Pramath. In a fierce, competitive world where the world has shrunk, and especially in these COVID times, how critical is it to build a social capital in today's world? And how does one go about doing that, especially in a remote, not connected, in a way connected and yet not personally present world?
See, I think that as the world has expanded and things have become crazier, a lot of people assume that social capital has to also be scaled up, that you have to build capital with lots of people, right? How many people's Rolodex, how many people are in my Rolodex, and how many people do I shake hands with at a conference? And I think what hasn't changed is that all you need is a few strong relationships. And those relationships can even be built in this way. If you don't get carried away by the numbers and social media and all the number of friends you have and links you have on LinkedIn, and whether it's 100 or thousands, I think none of that still matters. What matters is who are the handful of people you are who you have strong relationships. This is the whole idea of strong ties and weak ties. And the other interesting concept that I like about this whole idea of social capital is this notion of give and take. Social capital is not built on just, because I'm famous and you are famous and we'll kind of hobnob and hang out together or be part of some club. Social capital is built because I do something for you and you do something for me when I need it, right? And it's not transactional. I don't mean it that way. You actually do in a fairly selfless manner, right? One of the reasons I'm part of, I have gotten to know both of you, is that you've been very skillful in involving me in Talentnomics, right? So I have always told you that I find it very difficult to attend board meetings. And I say, listen, you should let me get off the board. But you don't do that. Yet, you make sure that you involve me because you know that I get engaged if you give me something to do. And I do that. So I think that's how social capital between both of you and me has gotten built. I actually didn't know you. We were introduced by a common friend. And it's not like we've spent a lot of time together, but I know now that our relationship has developed into one where if I needed something truly, I could call you. And similarly, you feel comfortable enough to reach out to me. I think that's how you build social capital. It doesn't have to be with hundreds of people. And the people change with time, over periods of time in your life and your career. But I think really being focused on the few and building them in a very high quality manner is how I would build social capital. In fact, you need it more than ever before in this world.
Sure. That's so well said. Yeah, I don't think it's about the numbers. We keep looking at these numbers on social media, how many followers we have, and how many people in LinkedIn. But I think what you're right truly is the true connections and true relationships that we build over time. And Ipsita was talking about it, that if you really look at all the speakers that we have had since yesterday and today are really friends of friends, and the whole social capital that a lot of people have actually added value to this whole conference. It couldn't have been possible otherwise. So I think that kind of tells us about the 4 C's that we were talking about, the framework. I wanted to just end by a quiz to Ipsita as a founder of Talentnomics. And Pramath, feel free to add as well. Do you think, Ipsita, we at Talentnomics have actually influenced the ecosystem? Have you, what the goal you started, the vision you started with about five years back, how do you feel about it? And how do you think you've been able to impact the ecosystem?
Good question. Maybe you should ask and let our participants and our ecosystem answer that question, whether we've been able to influence the ecosystem. But what I can try and tell you is what we try to do, how we try to do it. And I'll tell you a little bit about the results of it, but I will let the others judge how much impact we've had on the ecosystem. And maybe Pramath can add to it. So what we try to do, Vinu, is at the individual level, we work with potential women leaders to help unleash their potential. They have obviously the potential, but there are all these mindset issues which come in the way of them reaching their full potential. And Vinu, you've been working the work around it, around this whole issue of unleashing potential of women leaders with Talentnomics India. So why don't you share your thoughts on how you think has impacted the ecosystem?
I like
The
that. You
question
put the
back to
question
you.
back to me. Yeah. Okay. No, I think I've loved and enjoyed this piece of what we try and do at Talentnomics, which is, and I'm so glad Aparna is on the same window as us, because Aparna, you've kind of been a beneficiary of what we do at Talentnomics. So can't tell you how proud we are that you're here and supporting us. But I think the way I look at it, very simply, I would say that we've influenced the ecosystem in two ways. One, I think unleashing the potential of women leaders to reach much higher goals and their dreams across sectors. I think that's the first thing that I think we've been able to impact. We've so far been able to influence 60 plus women in top leadership roles across the industry. So very proud of that. But the thing which I'm even more kind of, which is more proud of and feel very nice about is the fact that these very women, and Aparna, one of them, have gone back and actually created a ripple effect in their organizations and the people they have touched. For example, a lot of them have gone back and actually started similar initiatives in their own organization around growing and supporting other women professionals. All of them have gone back and actively become mentors for women leaders. Some of them have taken us back to their organization, and Aparna knows that she was with GSK. We are now doing an in-house customized program for GSK to build their pipeline of women leaders. So I would say, yes, I mean, we started the journey, and what the beauty is that I can see the ripple, and we've got all these girls who are actually supporting us in this journey. So yeah, I mean, I think we've definitely made some progress. Lots to do, but we've started well.
Thank you, Vinu. So I'm glad you answered your own question. So the other level that we tried to impact is at the organizational level. So our aim is to influence both men and women leaders in the organization to support the journey of these women leaders. This one thing is to prepare these women leaders to lead. The other thing is to also help create a more equal environment for them. So we hold conferences like this, both for men and women, to discuss the issue, to share success story, and to talk about gender parity at home and at work. So far we've discussed this issue with probably more than 1,000 men and women, I would say, over the last 5 years, conferences and discussion sessions. We also work with leaders across organizations to help build their pipeline. As you mentioned about GSK, we collaborate with leaders and mentors in various organizations to guide the potential women leaders. Pramath has been a mentor. Many of the other leaders from different sectors have been mentors to these women leaders. And in a way, we feel that not only enhances their understanding of the issues women face, but also increases their commitment to address these issues. So, and we have now probably more than 60, 70 mentors across the world who are guiding these women in their journey, and really proud of them. The last broad area, the way we contribute is on thought leadership in the area. So we do our blogs, we publish case studies, we have undertaken research and surveys, and much of them is available on our website in terms of tools that could help women, that could help organizations to assess their gender parity, that could help women to become more resilient. So we're sort of growing our contribution to thought leadership in this area. It's taken us 5 years to reach where we are. Maybe in terms of numbers, the impact has not been as big as it could have been, maybe. But maybe it's time for us to think of a larger impact, maybe through partnership with like-minded organizations. But we hope each of these efforts will actually help both men and women to reflect on their own biases and break some of the stereotypes and set equal norms so that all of us can grow together. So that's our hope. As I started off in the beginning, we want to live a world which is a more equitable world for our daughters and our granddaughters.
So Ipsita, we're kind of out of time. So thank you so much. But I have thank you and to Pramath. But I have one last question for Pramath, and it's a very selfish one. So Pramath, there are many organizations promoting women leaders. What, as per you, is the unique thing that Talenomics India brings that made you join us and support us?
I think all organizations ultimately at this stage are as good as their leaders. And I'm not saying this to flatter the two of you, but ultimately the reason I think you'll make an impact and are making an impact is the commitment that you both bring to this. And that's honestly all there is to it. So I was quite impressed with your vision, and I was impressed with your commitment and your passion and the fact that you were, willing to give it your all, and that you have. I've noticed that you've gone through lots of ups and many downs, by the way. So I've watched your journey, and the fact that you have had the resilience to bounce back and to carry on. I think all organizations, institutions in the early stages go through this. And I think the fact that you have soldiered on and pushed ahead gives me the confidence. And of course, I've had exposure to conferences and mentoring and so on. So what you do is high quality. And that again goes back to what I was saying earlier, that you've delivered, you've put your money where your mouth is in terms of saying, listen, we said we'll do good things and this is what it is. So I think for all those reasons, I feel very excited to be part of this, and may the force be with you and everyone else who is helping you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Pramath. Those were lovely words. I'm sure Ipsita is also on the top of the world, so are we. Yes. So thank you for being here, and over to you, Aparna.
Thank you. Thank you. I think so at the outset, let me just bow down to you all. Amazing, amazing work over the years. And of course, the key takeaway from the conference, the leadership framework, which has included the essential qualities of grit and grace. Awesome. Thank you all for joining. And now I'll request the audience, kind of we're running out of time, to join the next session by clicking on the Join Now tab. My co-host Anish is waiting for you all there. See you soon. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you, Pramath.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you, Aparna.
Thank you, Aparna.